morning. My name is John Marceno, and I'm the president and CEO of Advanced My Inheritance. So on today's video, I thought we would explore the question of, does it make sense financially, always, to do an inheritance or probate advance? And so right off the bat, the answer to that question is no, or maybe not. And so I thought we would go through this video and talk about, times when it may be a great financial option, and then times when it may not make financial sense. And so I know you find that hard, this whole conversation coming from me, because you would expect me, someone in my position, to say, you always need a inheritance advance to fix all of your ills. But I obviously know that's not true. The truth is, I value trust with my customers over any single one transaction getting funded. So let's go ahead and explore this question. And the only way you can explore it is to take a look at, different examples where, it makes sense, and some examples where it may not make financial sense. There's no sense in paying the fees on an inheritance advance if you don't need to. If you have a car and it's working and it gets you back and forth to work, and you just want an upgrade, that's great. Get the upgrade, but just wait so you're not wasting money on fees that you wouldn't necessarily have to pay. So that's one example that comes across my desk sometimes, and I'm like, it may not make financial sense for somebody to do this. And I'd rather have that money in their pocket, knowing that they're preserving the legacy that was left behind to them from their loved ones. Remember, your loved one, whoever left this money to you or this inheritance, they worked their entire adult life to make sure that they did leave something to you. So, that may be an example that, you really want to think about before you do. So here's a second example. Probate case has been going on a while, longer than probably everybody expected. And you just get frustrated and decide, I just need part of my money now. I don't care, I just want money now. Well, again, I'll kind of come back to the litmus test of, do you really need the money? If you do, great. Then obviously, that's what an inheritance advance is for. But if you don't need the money, then why pay fees on, a transaction when you don't have to? And remember, if the probate case is taking a really long time, there may be, sort of underlying reasons why it is taking long. And the reason why I bring this up is because if it continues to take a long time and you do take an inheritance advance, you could be in a situation where you pay out max fees. Because remember, an inheritance advance, the way the fees work is that the longer it takes to get repaid, the more the fees are. So if you don't need the money, I would just, see if you can hit the pause button. But here's an example where, kind of the opposite of that, where it may make sense. Same kind of situation, probate's taking a really long time, and all of a sudden you find that you have to move out of the property. The lawyer contacts you and says, hey, the executor and I were talking, we're selling the property and you need to get out, and you have a week. And you find yourself in a situation where you have nowhere to go. And you have no funds to actually go rent an apartment or a house or get to that next chapter of your life. Well, this may be a really good time or example to go ahead and use an inheritance advance so that you can get that next apartment or home and start this next chapter of your life. So in one case, when you may not need the money, and probably I would question whether it makes sense for you financially to take an inheritance just to have the money, versus this time when you're sitting in a situation where you have to move out and there's no other way that you can do it. There's a third one. I don't want to make it sound like, the only reason why you should do an advance or the only opportunity here is a situation where, you're in desperate need of money and, you can't get it anywhere else. The truth is, I had a customer come to me about a year ago. He had a couple of commercial buildings in his portfolio. He was doing financially well. And he came upon an opportunity to buy another commercial building that was going to have great ROI, return on investment, and make plenty of cash flow for him. The problem is that when he went to his bank to go ahead and borrow the funds to purchase this building, they said it was going to take about 14 weeks to get it turned around. Well, he didn't have 14 weeks to wait for approval. He just didn't have it. The building would have been sold and gone by then. So he actually took an advance and bought the building in order to do it. Now, it made complete financial sense for him because the return on investment far outweighed the amount of fees that he was going to pay, even if it went to the max fees on an advance. So in this situation, he leveraged his inheritance to go ahead and grow his real estate portfolio. I also can think of another situation where a gentleman came to us and he had 3 trucks in his business, and he had the opportunity to buy 2 more from another business that was failing. And he was able to expand his routes, and he was able to expand his business. And ultimately, it winded up being a tremendous situation for him and a great opportunity because he had the ability to get an inheritance advanced. So the question comes in, and this is what you should be looking at, is does it make financial sense? I would just ask you to really go through that question. I would just want to make sure that it's right for you and your family to financially do an inheritance advance. And if it is, great, then that's why it's here. But if it's not and you can wait, then I would always tell you, then please wait. So if you're working with a company that's not going through this discovery process with you, and they're not taking the time to, one, explain all the fees fully to you, that they're not looking at all the different angles of whether it makes financial sense for you or not, if they're not taking the time to go through the entire process of how you're approved and how they go about it, and they're not really spending the time, helping you through this transaction, then I'm going to tell you, you're working with the wrong company. They should always have your best interest at heart. And if they don't, I would say find a company that does. Here at Advance My Inheritance, we always work to make sure that when a customer comes to us, that we improve their situation and not make it worse. There are a lot of great companies in this industry and lots of great individuals that always try to do the right thing by their customer. And it is truly a great industry. But if you find yourself working with a company that's not doing those things, then please find yourself another company and give us a call. Again, my name is John Marceno, and I'm the president and CEO of Advance My Inheritance. We'd love to be able to talk you through this situation, understand exactly what your needs are, and help you in any way we can. At Advance My Inheritance, we do probate right.